Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Glad to have on our live line this morning Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Assemblyman, thank you for calling in.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be with you again.
Well, Assemblyman, we got a lot to talk about today. The bail reforms that went into effect last week. That started out, as soon as it got passed, upstate law enforcement and upstate Republican lawmakers were predicting that this was going to cause major problems. Now, I've heard from law enforcement in Allegheny County that it's already started there in Allegheny County that a suspect taunted and punched law enforcement over there. I don't have the whole story yet, so I haven't gone on the air with it completely as of yet, naming names and saying exactly where that happened. I got to get that confirmed first. But I've heard that that's been going on. I wanted to talk with you about that and a lot of other topics. Go ahead, Assemblyman, your thoughts on the bail reform and what you're hearing so far.
Well, these so-called criminal justice reforms, if you want to call it that, are dangerous. I was proud to stand with district attorneys and sheriffs from across our region last month to, again, sound the alarm on this dangerous new law that was coming forward and is now on the books. You mentioned what happened in Allegheny County with a police officer. There's an article in the New York Post about down in Brooklyn where some individual sucker punched a NYPD officer and then jumped on top of him and held him. The individual was released without bail. I mean, things like that. There you see continually a number of crimes that you talk about. There's the Albany County District Attorney, a Democrat, is voicing concerns about the law because even the case of manslaughter in the second degree is not considered a serious enough crime where they had someone who was basically, they had for this crime, someone who was murdered, a 29-year-old young lady who was found with her throat cut, and they arrested him on this. He was released, so there was outrage about this. I mean, these are the types of crimes you consider to see, the hate crime type stuff that you're seeing going on in the Jewish communities. It's very scary. I mean, there's ways out for these people who commit dangerous acts. There's one lady down in New York City who attacked 3 Jewish women, was released, and a week later she attacked someone else. I mean, these are the types of crimes that you're seeing. This is the policies that the governor and the Democratic-led Assembly and Senate put forward. This is dangerous for our communities that we're going to see. There's no judicial discretion to hold someone who's considered a threat. They can't. The judges can't hold them. They can't use that judicial discretion at all. They have to release them, issue them an appearance ticket to show back up for court. Like some of these people are going to show back up for court. And in New York City, how are they trying to get people to come back to court? They're enticing them with Mets tickets and things of that nature, so at the taxpayer expense. I mean,
yeah, and I've seen a lot of people making sarcastic comments about that. Assemblyman Palmesano, about, they'll post a story about a crime and say, does this suspect get tickets to a Mets game? Talking to Assemblyman Phil Palmesano, I wanted to stop you there, Assemblyman, because reporter Marsha Kramer from CBS 2 in New York City had State Senate Majority Leader Democrat Andrea Stewart-Cousins on the other day. They talked about the anti-Semitic attacks that have been going on one after another in downstate. And the reporter asked the Senate leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, do you think that there will be some changes to the criminal reform, bail reform laws that just went into effect? Andrea Stewart-Cousins said they would absolutely look at it and make appropriate changes as necessary. Are you hearing anything on that in the state assembly?
I'm hoping so, Brian. They have to do something. They can't leave this law untouched the way they passed it. This bill was passed as part of the budget, which never should have happened. It was passed without any input from law enforcement or district attorneys. And, of course, I see the majority leader says, we're going to consult with them. Well, you should have consulted them before you passed this dangerous law, first of all. So this bill definitely, I would love to see it scrapped altogether, delayed, but it needs to, at a minimum, be amended for a few things to allow for judicial discretion for judges who find an individual could be a danger to society. They should be able to be held without bail or held for bail. And then you have these anti-Semitic attacks. I mentioned one of the ladies who attacked 3 Jewish women. even Mayor de Blasio has come out and said we need to do some amendments to this. The problem that we're hearing, Brian, is you have this still have this extreme, some people call it progressive, I call it extreme wing of the Democratic Party that's in control in Albany. A number of the members in my house in the Assembly are being primaried by extreme people even further to the left of them. Even though these people who are in office put forth this law, ushered it through, they're being primaried. So you have these activist groups saying, don't make any changes to the law. Leave it the way it is. You should be doing more to help criminals. And it's just mind-boggling to me. So,
are these primaries? Is this coming from AOC and the squad? Do you know?
What's that, Brian?
The primary threats and challenges. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Westchester County Congresswoman, has talked about how she's going to have certain people primaried. Although people have said that to her too. But is AOC responsible for these primary threats?
Well, it's certainly those who think along the same lines, that have the same philosophy and mentality when it comes to governing, whether you want to call it progressive, I call it extreme. But you have socialists that are elected to the New York State Senate and who are running for the New York State Assembly to replace other members who are already there, who are already pretty liberal and progressive. So you have this extreme wing of the Democratic Party. I've said over and over again, the Democratic Party of our parents and grandparents, I have family members who are Democrats, I have friends who are Democrats. The Democratic Party running New York State is not the Democratic Party of our parents and grandparents, the Democratic Party of, I would say, of Hornell and upstate New York. No, it's been co-opted by this extreme, dangerous agenda and wing of the party, and that's what you're seeing with these dangerous criminal justice laws that are on the books, and they want to continue to do more damage, and it's dangerous. And I think Sheriff Allard said it best with these law enforcement, with these changes that have been made. It's like you're taking the handcuffs off the criminals and you're putting the handcuffs on the cops. It's very sad. It's very scary. And I think we need to have changes. Something has to happen. I would rather see the whole thing scrapped and start over again. Talk with our law enforcement. Talk with the district attorneys who are on the ground who have to do this type of prosecution. Between that and the discovery changes, which is going to be a costly unfunded mandate placed on our local counties and our DAs, which is going to be picked up by the property taxpayer. Think about it. You're going to be paying more in taxes, but you're going to be less safe. Someone burglarizes your home, they can't be held for bail. Now they're going to be released.
Assemblyman, I want to ask you a question on this. The changes are coming from New York City. What was the problem in New York City? There's stories of people being held in Rikers and in other downstate jails for too long on minor offenses. What do we know about that?
Well, I mean, listen, I don't think there's anyone out there who says we shouldn't look to do some reform, but what they've done was extreme and far above and beyond what they needed to do. So, yes, there's things we could have looked at with bail reform. There's things we could have looked at relative to discovery. But what they put in place is basically taking what they want to try to do in New York City and plaster it all across upstate New York where we didn't have those problems, those challenges. It's kind of what you see in a lot of policies. It's something that might be better for New York City is being pushed and shoved down the throats of everyone across the state. But even in New York City, this is extreme because you already see what's going on down there with the attack on the police officers, with the attack and the hate crimes that are going on down there. I mean, we need to address this. This can't continue the way it's going because it's too dangerous. People are going to die. People are going to get seriously hurt, and people are going to get a slap on the wrist. If they don't think that they're going to have to go to jail, like I think about it again, Brian, a drug dealer comes into Hornell and selling drugs to kids or fentanyl, and they come in from New York City and they're going to issue a ticket to come back to court. Like they're ever going to come back to Hornell again. They're going to send the next drug dealer in, and they're going to keep doing. It's going to be a revolving door of drug dealers coming in because they know that they can't be held and put in prison because of these dangerous new laws that were passed by Governor Cuomo, by the Assembly Democratic majority and the Senate majority. Speaker Hasty, Majority Leader Cousins, and their conferences passed this dangerous law with the governor's support. And that's wrong, and I hope people call the governor. We need him to lead on this. He has the authority to do some of this. He should issue an executive order and stop this, delay this, make changes to this. He's done it before on other things. Why not do it on this? This is about people's safety and livelihood and their lives being protected. But the laws that are on the book right now makes people in our communities, whether it's Hornell, the Southern Tier, all across the state, less safe. No one can deny that, a Republican, a Democratic, period. We should all be calling the governor's office and ask him to put a hold on this, delay it, make the changes. So I call on our friends in the Democratic Party in Hornell and around the Southern Tier, call on the governor and tell him to stop this dangerous law from being implemented, delay it. We need to make changes because otherwise people are going to get hurt, they're going to get killed. Until something is done, I don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to keep pushing. All of us will keep pushing for these changes because it's the right thing to do. But we need people to speak up. Change can happen, Brian, because we remember the governor's tax replacement fee for license plates. That stopped not because myself, Senator O'Mara, Marge Burns, and all of us spoke up. We all did, but it was because there was outrage from the community, from the public. That's why the change was stopped. That's why the delay happened. It can happen again with these dangerous criminal justice laws, this bail reform discovery, if the public speaks up. We should be lighting up Governor Cuomo's phone like a Christmas tree. Tell him, please, lead. Keep us safe, because the laws that you signed, that you supported, along with the Democrats in charge in Albany, has made our communities less safe. It's not keeping us safe, and it's costing us more as taxpayers. So please, make the changes, make the delays, implementing this. Personally, I think we should scrap the whole thing and start over. Yes, let's look to where we can reform, but let's include our district attorneys and our law enforcement in this discussion because they were left on the curb and were not consulted at all. It was just these extreme activists who are pushing for changes, and that's wrong, and that's why right now we're paying the price in our communities. You see it over and over again. There's going to continue to be more and more stories. I talked to a colleague of mine in Long Island. He said someone was arrested for burglary on 6 different accounts, were released, and then again on New Year's Day, burglarized someplace else after they were released the next day. I mean, these types of things are going to continue to happen. If people think there are going to be no repercussions, there's no deterrent for assaulting a police officer, there's no deterrent for breaking into someone's home, there's no deterrent for domestic violence, what's going to stop more and more of this from going on? And it's very scary and wrong, and we need the governor of this state to lead on this.
Talking to Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. I want to take a quick break, check the forecast. When we get back, we're going to talk about a vaccine issue, some legislation that they're trying to pass out of New York City. Stay with us.
The New Year's Warehouse Sales event has been extended until the end of January at Mullen Factory Direct Flooring in Almond. You'll save up to 75% on over 500,000 square feet of in-stock flooring. The major name brands, hardwoods, laminate, vinyl, and carpet. Keep your cash in your pocket and take advantage of special payment options like 0% interest to qualified buyers. If you're planning a flooring project, you can't miss this sale. The New Year's Warehouse Sales event's been extended till January 31st at Mullen Factory Direct Flooring in Almond. Don't miss out on these deals.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll. Rob, a little snowy out there this morning.
It is, Brian. We've got a little disturbance, which is lifting across the state, and that's what's triggering the light snow and the snow showers, which we're seeing all the way from western New England to Lake Erie this morning. The light snow is going to taper off as the morning goes on, and we'll actually see some breaks of sunshine develop this afternoon. Looks to turn breezy. It's going to be chilly. Highs today 30 to 35. Brian, sunrise this morning was at 7:39. Sunset tonight is at 4:53. We'll have partly cloudy skies for tonight. Lows will be 20 to 25. Tomorrow, upper level disturbance will cross the region. Second one we'll be dealing with this week. Partial sunshine with the risk of a couple of snow showers tomorrow. Highs will be 35 to 40. Scattered snow showers are in the forecast for tomorrow night. Lows down to about 20 to 25. And we could see additional snow showers during the day at times on Wednesday. Brian, the highs on Wednesday, a little cold, 25 to 30. It then turns milder Thursday and into Friday.
Back live with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano on this vaccine issue that we wanted to discuss this morning. Vaccines are very controversial. These days, especially, I don't remember it being that way so much growing up with the polio vaccine, the little sugar cube thing, but now there's a lot more vaccines, a number of them mandated. There's some lawsuits, actually, in Steuben County over this. Well, here's some legislation that State Senator Brad Hoylman, the Democrat in Manhattan, and New York City Assemblywoman Liz Kruger want to pass. The Assembly Bill, 3899A. Liz Kruger. To ensure that the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention, including immunization of a sexually transmissible disease, are available when most effective. Now, I read on one website that they were talking about 11-year-olds for this. Assemblyman, I'm guessing you have some thoughts here.
Yes, Brian. I mean, this is just another pattern. We know earlier in the year they passed banning the religious exemption to eliminate the religious exemption. We've dealt with an issue on the medical exemption where they made changes through the regulations that make it more difficult for students who are getting the medical exemption because who have bad reactions, making it more difficult for people to get the medical exemption. And there's an issue and a lawsuit going on that where we're dealing with a family up in Penn Yan on that. And then you see this with. It's primarily you hear being talked about with the HPV vaccine that I know, I think it was in 2017, the Commissioner of Health issued a regulation that would give the authority to give vaccines for students who, without parents' permission. I mean, we're talking about, they're referring to as preventative treatment for STDs. Without the parents' information, without parents' involvement, to be able to vaccine a child for an STD without parental consent is just wrong. It's basically steps on parental rights. It's just now you have legislation that's being introduced to make that happen and to put it on the law books as well. I don't know if there's been any challenge to the regulation, but certainly I think there's going to be challenges to this law if it was to be passed. Hopefully it won't pass. Hopefully it won't move. But that's the mentality where people have, and it's taking away parental rights. Parents should have a say in the treatment of their children when it comes to how they're being cared for. I mean, you see this over and over again where they want people who get an abortion without parental consent. I mean, it's just more and more of this type of thinking. It's really scary for me to see.
So 11-year-olds, that's what, 5th grade?
Geez, Brian, I think, yeah, you're right around that, 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I think I hear 11, 12 years old, that type of.
Yeah, and they need STD vaccines in 5th grade. Okay, all right. I'm guessing that there'll be some pushback on that one. Assemblyman, you've spoken before on the issue of vaccines. What's your thoughts on the whole issue of the kid gets the vaccine or does not go to school?
I think there's two problems with it. I think you have the issue with the religious. There's part of this is from a religious perspective. It kind of went. I think it went too far when they took away the religious exemption because there are people who have deeply held religious beliefs when it comes to the vaccine issue. And I think that's just kind of going down a slippery slope when you start to say, okay, if you could take away someone's religious freedoms for that, you could take away someone's religious freedoms for something else. And how is that going to work as we move forward? And then I've seen it even expand more into the medical exemption issue, where people who, we were dealing with a family up in Penn Yan, their 12-year-old son is severely autistic, who used to get the medical exemption because of their reaction to foreign bodies and has their brain resiliency. The commissioner made a regulation change in August, 3 weeks before school started, so it changed the way the medical exemption was given out. So now that student is not going to school, and it's just been really disruptive. Someone with autism has to have on a schedule. It's really messed them up a little bit. It hurts their family, so I know there's a lawsuit on that. I think this has gone too far. Listen, I'm not anti-vaccine. We vaccine our children. Other people vaccine their children, but I think you have to be very careful, too, when you get into violation of religious freedoms, because then if you can take it away for religious freedoms for one thing, you can take it away for something else, and then something else, and then what happens? But I'm just very concerned, and then you see these mandates now with these sexual transmitted diseases to mandate these vaccines to be available for people without parental consent, not to even give the parents a say in this issue, and then even the discussion that you hear about that they might even want to include this as a mandatory vaccine to be in school. I mean, that's just going way overboard. It's just going down a dangerous road, but nothing surprises me what's been going on with the state over the past year. We can talk about a whole host of issues. Brian, we've gone over this all year long. We just talked about the criminal justice reform. We could talk about the extreme expansion of abortion for late-term abortions up until the moment of birth. I mean, things like that. That's the trajectory of the bills and legislation and laws we've seen coming out of this one-party rule system in Albany with Governor Cuomo, the Democratic Assembly, and the Democratic Senate. And these are the types of things we're seeing, and these are the types of things that I'm going to continue to speak out and push back on and fight against. This is the types of things we're talking about this because we want to alarm the public and make sure they speak up. Call the governor, call the legislative leaders, and tell them not to advance these bills that are dangerous for us. And I think this is another one of those bills that we're talking about with these mandatory vaccines, but also basically allowing vaccines to be given to children without parental consent. It's just a danger. Allowing a school to give it to someone without the parental involvement, I think, is wrong, and it's heading down a dangerous road.
Talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmesano. Down to the last couple of minutes, wanted to talk briefly with you about the Brian Kolb situation. We know he was arrested for DWI in his hometown area there in Ontario County. As far as what happens next, do you have any thoughts as to who the next Assembly minority leader might be, or where things are going from here?
First of all, what happened with Assemblyman Kolb? I mean, he's a friend of mine. It was a very sad situation. It was a terrible, terrible thing he did. It was a bad mistake in judgment. He admitted that. There's no defending it. But he certainly made the right decision for our state and a right decision for our conference to step aside as leader. There's a lot of important issues that need to be addressed, and these criminal justice reforms that we're talking about pushing back on. We don't need any distractions. That would have been a distraction. It would have been hard. So I'm glad he stepped aside for our conference. Yes, and I'm supporting Will Barkley from Oswego area. I think he's going to be our next minority leader. He'll do a great job. He's got great experience. He'll be able to keep the conference together and unify us as we move forward to continue to speak out and fight and push back against some of these dangerous proposals that we're seeing coming out of Albany and the leaderships in Albany, whether it's the governor, whether it's the Assembly majority or the Senate Democratic majority. We need to push back and speak out in a united voice. And I know with Will Barkley as our leader, that's going to happen. And I look forward to being a part of his team to help give a voice to these issues so the people that we represent, particularly in upstate New York, can have their voice heard, their concerns heard and raised to every level we need to raise it to. Hopefully.
And Assemblyman, down to the last 60 seconds. I'm sorry I didn't get to this before, but we have so many issues. The death over the weekend down in Florida of former Allegheny County Assemblyman John Hasper.
Yes, and certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to Mr. Hasper's family. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Hasper when I was an intern in 1990 in Albany, and I used to travel back and forth sometimes with Mr. Davidson. But I also met him when I was working for Jim Bacalus in 1995, 96, when he was appointed to Governor Pataki's staff, doing some work for the governor. I remember his leadership when they were trying to put a landfill toxic dump, I think it was a hazardous dump in Allegheny County. I can't remember exactly what it was, back in the 80s and early 90s. He stood up to Governor Mario Cuomo. And that's why we continue to stand up to this Governor Cuomo when he's doing things that are dangerous for our area. But Mr. Hasper certainly was one of those leaders who stood up, spoke up, and represented the community, and had made sure their voice was heard all across the state and in Albany for sure. So certainly sad to hear of his passing. But again, our thoughts and prayers go with him and his family. But his impact to the region he served will always be felt long beyond his years.
Assemblyman, with that, we have to leave it. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.